election. One of them happens to be Bidenomics, right? I mean, Bidenomics, by all measures, is, I think you can just flat out come and say it's been a total failure. I mean, when prices are up between 18 and 20% from where they were in 2020, that's a lot more than the 2.5% the Federal Reserve likes to shoot for, ladies and gentlemen. And then when you look at some things like rents, they're up even more, or mortgage prices. I mean, the amount of money that people are paying in mortgage costs now versus, say, what they were paying in 2020, it's up 66%. So this is pretty extraordinary. When we go into the State of the Union this week, we are going to hear over and over and over again how Bidenomics is working. Bidenomics is just great. Well, what cracks me up, this is actually pretty funny, is that for all this talk of Bidenomics and all those nifty TikTokers there in the Biden administration, nobody had the bright idea to go and buy Bidenomics.com. Wouldn't you think that they might just try that? Well, I sat down with a guy who was smart enough to actually go and do this. And we just had a fantastic conversation about Bidenomics. We just did this yesterday. I want to bring this to you. I'm right here with you. We're going to talk in the chat a little bit about the conversation. Here he is from the Americans for Prosperity. Take a listen. The guy's smart enough to actually be out there calling one Bidenomics out and getting the handle to begin with. About whether Bidenomics really is working or not, I think we know the answer, is Akash Chougule from Americans for Prosperity. He is the Vice President of Government Affairs over there at AFP. It is good to see you.
Good to see you, Trish. Thanks for having me on.
So, every single poll you look at right now shows that people are really just tired of the Biden economy. Every single thing I see. And yet the administration keeps telling us Bidenomics is working. Bidenomics is working. Oh, inflation's coming down. But inflation isn't really coming down, is it, Akash? I'd like you to explain that and refute that point, if you would.
No, the White House can point to whatever little charts and line graphs they can, but you can't argue how people are feeling. And the way people are feeling is correct, which is that their life has gotten a lot more expensive since President Biden took office. And so even if these inflation indicators are down year over year, month over month from what they were a year ago, inflation has just been elevated and it's been climbing since the president took office and spent his additional $6 trillion with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer when the Democrats controlled Congress. And so even the baselines that they're measuring from are higher and higher and higher each month. The end result, Trish, is that the average American family is spending $11,400 more per year to afford the same quality of life that they had before Joe Biden took office. Our organization is going to hold him and the people that voted for his agenda accountable this year.
Akash, it's amazing. Like, that is truly, truly remarkable. We haven't seen an inflation uptick like that, since Carter?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Certainly not in my lifetime. And the thing is, in the 70s, it was kind of a slow drip. Here, we know how obvious the connection is. It's the trillions of dollars in reckless spending without doing anything to increase the supply of goods and services in the economy. Anyone, even without an economics degree, you don't need a PhD in economics to know that dumping trillions of dollars into the economy without increasing supply is going to drive up prices. That's what Americans are dealing with.
And they did it for so long. And by the way, it wasn't just what was happening in D.C. from Congress and from Biden. I mean, my gosh, he handed out the third stimulus check when he came into office. And I'm like, seriously? Right? Like, by then the economy was already opening up. And so it was just like a windfall for people. And so you could just see it. It was like, I was watching in real time, of course. I was the crazy person in August of 2020 when Donald Trump handed out the second stimulus check. I was like, be careful, be careful, be careful, because you combine that with what the Federal Reserve was doing, printing like there was no tomorrow, and they wouldn't stop printing. And they just kept printing and printing and printing and printing. And I'm like, whoa, it's coming at us from every single direction. How would you not have inflation? I mean, even today, you look at hotel prices, you look at airfare prices, you look at egg prices, for goodness sakes. Everything is higher.
Trish, 59% of Americans say they feel angry, anxious, or frustrated when they go grocery shopping. Now, that's a data point. Your listeners don't need to listen to polls to know that they're frustrated. I mean, we heard these stories all over the country the past couple of years. If you recall, AFP was doing events at gas stations and grocery stores. We were actually helping people, afford the price of gas during the worst months of inflation, things like that. Some of the stories we heard. I mean, I remember I was doing an event in Pennsylvania. A mom who literally week to week was choosing between filling a full tank of gas to get to work or enough diapers for her baby to last until next week. I met a couple who used to go out to dinner once a month and has to cancel date night because restaurant prices are so expensive. And these are short-term indicators, but then you look at interest rates, people's ability to buy a car if their family is growing, buy a new home. I mean, the American dream is getting further and further out of reach. And that's simply not what you're hearing from the White House because they don't want to be honest about what's going on. And so we're doing it for them at Bidenomics.com starting today.
Okay, I got to get to that. But I mean, gosh, it's striking how quickly it happened too, right? And it shows you, and this is why I'm a nerd for policy, and especially when it comes to economic policy, but it just shows you how important this stuff is and that you don't want to mess around because you can so quickly screw it up as this team has, frankly. I mean, and they had every warning. I mean, they didn't have to listen to me. Larry Summers, their friend, right, who is a tried and true Democrat, or at least he may be feeling that he's more conservative these days, but he was trying to warn them too in terms of the Federal Reserve and in terms of Congress, et cetera, that you were going to have this mass inflation. And sure enough, we've got it. So Bidenomics.com, this one cracks me up. Okay. So I was reading about you guys and I learned you had Bidenomics.com and I'm like, wait a second. Like Joe Biden doesn't own, White House doesn't own Bidenomics.com. Americans for Prosperity owns this one.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been calling it Bidenomics and all these things. And then all of a sudden you realize Bidenomics.com itself is available for a White House full of millennial and Gen Z TikTokers who live online and seem like they haven't touched grass in months. Not to take this basic digital 101 step to purchase Bidenomics.com left the opportunity for us not only to buy this domain, Trish, in advance of the State of the Union, but we're going to be doing, people can see at Bidenomics.com, a rhetoric versus reality fact check of the president in real time today, this week, at the State of the Union, and throughout the fall. As they're on the campaign trail, they're in these key states and districts. We will be using Bidenomics.com, ads, and many other outlets to tell people what's really going on with this economy that they're not hearing from Joe Biden and the Democrats who voted for the agenda that caused this inflation crisis.
It's incredible. And people should go and check it out, Bidenomics.com, because that's where you're going to actually be able to cut through this noise and cut through this spin. I'm sort of surprised. I mean, I look at it and I'm like, okay, politically speaking, I don't think this is working for you, buddy. Like, you keep talking about how great the economy is, and actually it makes you look more and more apart and separated from your core constituency that you need to go out and vote for you, because you look like, you're pie in the sky, Marie Antoinette-esque, as opposed to somebody who really understands and appreciates what they're going through. You can't sit there and tell people like it's better when in my neck of the woods, and granted I live in the New York City suburbs, so it's like $7.99 when you go for eggs, like just for a dozen eggs. And I'm like, wow, I mean, this is steep. And so when Joe Biden tries to tell me that there's nothing to worry about, it just makes me, and I think every other American, feel like you are so out of touch. There's no hope.
No, totally. I think it's two problems. The American people already don't trust Joe Biden because of his age, and he can't string together a sentence. And then you have the unwillingness to even acknowledge the fact that these problems exist. So it's like, one, you caused this problem. Two, you won't admit that it's wrong. And then three, you're incapable of fixing it. And so it's this double, triple whammy. I think our goal at Americans for Prosperity with Bidenomics.com and our efforts throughout this year is to make sure that people remember why they're in the situation. They don't need us to tell them things are expensive. What we're making sure people know is that it's because of the trillions of dollars in reckless spending, tens of thousands of pages of regulations, and things like giveaways to the green energy industry and big labor unions, and prioritizing his political allies over average Americans is why we're in this situation.
Akash, I never got that one either. I mean, from a national security standpoint and from a healthy economy standpoint, it seems very logical, right? That you would want to ensure that you have the most energy possible, certainly within your own market space that you can have more control over. You knew that things were heating up overseas. I would assume you knew that they were heating up enough that you might actually have to look at sanctions on Russia, which means you're going to take all this natural gas right off the market. And, what's that going to do to natural gas prices when you take off a big chunk? I realize it's fungible, whatever. And, Russia's doing fine because it still finds a way to sell its natural gas for more money now. But reality is it drove up prices and you had no alternative, nowhere else to go. It's like the left hand's not talking to the right hand. I mean, again, none of this is, you say you have to have a PhD in economics to figure this out. I mean, it seems, again, pretty obvious stuff. You're going to take off a supply source and you get nothing to replace it with. And you think it's okay because the average American should have to pay for that? Like they're taking it on the chin. They're the ones feeling the brunt of this pain.
Here's the greatest irony, Trish. It's not like he caused this overnight transition to renewable energies. All we did was drain down the strategic production reserve to its lowest levels ever. And then he went and begged Venezuela and Iran to produce more natural gas. I mean, we're going to countries that do things dirtier than we do for the environment, have all kinds of human rights abuses, and we're harming American workers in the process while also not even achieving his goals in the energy and environment space, while making the country weaker and more susceptible to uncertainty on the global scale. I mean, the lesson here really is one for the American people in general, but I think policymakers in Washington of both parties, right? The American people don't want a lot from government. They want hands off a free market that creates opportunity for them to build a better life for their family. We don't need what the Democrats have been pushing for the last 4 years. What we need is for Republicans to get the message that this is what Americans want to hear. This is the kind of leadership they want. Common sense, limited government, free markets, and